Hello everyone, it's Josh or Circle Circle Math on Instagram. Today I'm going to go through some of these pattern overlays I've been doing in textures recently. Go through how I overlay it and kind of where I get a lot of the patterns from themselves. So yeah, let's get into it. Um, First and foremost, I usually go through thrift stores or vintage shops and find these fabrics or curtains or couches and snap pictures, and that's a great way to get some of these patterns. If you don't have that available or you haven't found anything recently, there is an amazing initiative by the Met Museum where they have hundreds upon hundreds of public domain images for you, free to use. So it's always a good one. Basically, you go to the art section, the Met collection, and then make sure you turn on open access. So that's public domain only results. And you can type in stuff like pattern, and you can find all this really old, great patterns to work from. Take some digging to find something that you works. Usually, I try to find a color that goes against whatever I'm working with, whatever image. So yeah, I already pulled a few of those, and yeah, so we're ready to go. First thing I do, definitely I usually clean up the model. So I'll press S to get to my brush. Actually, I'll duplicate this layer to always keep the base. Rasterize the layer because it's usually a smart object. Then I'm on my clone stamp tool, and I'll clean up anything I need to from the original images. It's probably all I just took out our lip ring. So from there, I'll add a new layer. Press B to get to my brushes. Make sure my brush is on black and white. And then I'll add a shadow layer. And then a highlight layer. Alright, so first working with the shadow, I'll press X to get to the black. Make sure my opacity is at 100 because it's easier to bring it down than it is to duplicate it. So what I'll do here is I'll go through and over exaggerate the shadows that are already there. So I'll usually hit the collarbones, any predominant features. That way it really stands out when you add the base layer. Probably get her nose right here. It's easier to come back in and clean it up than it is try to get it perfect. So then I'll do the highlight on the same. Press X to get to my white brush stroke. Bring up the collarbone peaks. And anything else that I kind of want to bring out. I'm going to bring out her cheek right here. Maybe a little bit more of this nose. Alright, and that's probably good for now. I'll come back in and add a blur and a little bit later when I can get to that point. Alright, so like I said, I already have a pattern that I picked out for this. It's some old tile. So what you want to do is make sure your layer is rasterized so you can use the smart tool. And we'll go through and take out the parts that we don't necessarily want. So there we go. I'll press F5 and go to content aware. Make sure the mode is normal, opacity 100, and press OK and see what we get. Should be just some kind of cool pattern, connects all the areas. Yeah, nothing too crazy, and you have a full pattern to work from. Alright, so you'll turn off that layer for a second. Go to your base layer. Go up to select, color range, and we want to select only the skin tones. So this is just a good starting point that I go from. A lot of times the background's too similar to this. But this one, there's nice contrast, and really the only thing in this tonal range is kind of highlights of her hair, and that's easier to take out. So I'll select a little eyedropper tool, hold shift to add to it, and then kind of drag around my skin tones, watching for this side section and seeing what it's actually pulling. Like if I go too much further, I'm going to start pulling some of that. Yeah, I think that's a good start. It's not going to take any of the background right there. So yeah, I'll press OK, and it's going to select what I had. So I'll come up with the selection still on, make sure my pattern is selected, and press the mask button. Now, just for the time being, I'll go to multiply and get my brush with the white and add to the layer. A lot of times it's better to just go on and get all in there and come back and take a little bit away. Make sure the edges are done, but not too much. You don't want the flat, choppy look like this going on. So yeah, I'll spend some time going through, blending it in with the hair a bit. You know, you can kind of see under the hair. I may adjust the opacity when I do the final touches to come back through. I really like how it looks on her eyelids already without doing any kind of adjustments. All right. So that's where we're at with that one. Now that we have the mask, I'll go through and set myself up for a little bit more success. I'll go back to my layer where I fixed the model, convert to a smart object, press Command-Shift-A to bring up the camera raw filter, and I'll go ahead and fully take the clarity up a bit to get more predominant shadows, features, really just bring out the detail in the model. I don't really do any color adjustment at this time unless it's necessary. And so yeah, everything's a little bit sharper now. I'll turn on my shadow layer, and I will actually probably go ahead and convert that to a smart object as well as the highlights. Nope. Yes. Convert to a smart object. And then I will do a Gaussian blur on this. That is the wrong one. And not so much. Yeah, right about there. And then I'll add a mask and kind of come back through and clean up where it shouldn't be. Oh, make sure my brush is up 100. Smooth that one in a bit. All right, yeah, looks good. And then I'll do the same for the highlights. Add the same Gaussian blur. And mask that out where it shouldn't be. All right. So what I do here, put the highlights on screen, the shadows on multiply, and then I'll kind of adjust the opacity of these. That way they're not so in your face. Then I come through on the layer of the pattern, go to my mask, Make sure my brush is on black, and then mask out the eye section. All right, do the same for the other eye. What I'll do for the lips is I will lower the opacity to mask it out and kind of just make it a little lighter so you can still see the lips pop out. Maybe that's too much, but we'll see. And then I can come back through, clean up the sections that kind of got left behind or jumped over the edge. Bring back up the opacity a bit, or a lot. Yeah, so I'll go through here and just spend a little bit more time blending it all in. Changing the opacities as needed. All right, so now that that's done, I can kind of loosen up on this a bit, on the opacity, find out the right area. I guess not too much for this one. A lot of times I'll go back and fix the background. So for this, I will copy the layer, rasterize, press S to get to my clone stamp tool and get out these wrinkles a bit. Actually, I may not even try to do that. I'll just use my mixer brush. So for this, mixer brush tool, hold Option to select the area, and then just kind of work it through. It is easy to do this incorrectly, and like, let's say you pick right up here, then you do that. You want to always go into where you're trying to blend into, and through the shadows to make sure it's right. Like, it's easier just to do it all and then come back through and kind of blend it in, smooth it out. Oop, see, look, I did it. Yeah, I found more success with this being one directional. Get another sample, another one direction sample. That way you don't accidentally pull something into your background, and everything ends up being pretty blended together. All right. In the end, this can probably do a little bit more, but for sake of time, I won't go too far into that. So what I'll do now, put that layer below the first one, add a mask to it, press X to take away from the mask. Oh, make sure you're back on the regular brush tool, turn up your opacity, and work it in. This is always difficult with lots of hairs or anything too complex, but that's where if you use a fine brush, shouldn't matter too much. All right, that's probably good. Whoop. All right, so there we go. We have our model, we have this. Let's make this a little bit more interesting and add something to the model's face. Let's push it back in her head like she's inside of herself. So what I'll do, kind of like my other tutorials, I'll come through with the pen tool, which is P, and then trace along the curvature of the face. All right, like that. What I'll do here, I'll go to my layer, press G, add a mask, hold Command, select my path. Actually, no mask. Come back just like that. Go to the layer underneath it, press New, solid layer. I'll pull something from her shadow right there. Looks good to me. Come back through with that mask, block everything out. Press the backslash to make sure you got everything. See where your mask ends. Alright, that's good. Alright, so I'll press new layer above that. Get my brush tool back out. Make sure I'm on the X. Add a little shadow. Just work it in like the other. File or filter, Gaussian blur. I'll definitely add a bigger Gaussian blur. Just create clipping mask to go to the layer below. Now I want to add the outside section, so go through here. Trace around the inside to add the little like layer of skin, I guess is what it is. Alright, so there's that. Deselect that path. Solid, new layer. Let's select a highlight this time, something closer to the skin tone. Delete that layer mask, Command Shift, or Command to select path, and you have your little section right there. I guess for this you can go back through and block it all out. You can also do this easier. You want to do this section if you do the background last instead of in the middle like I did this time. My apologies. But the coolest thing about design, there's like a million ways to do the same thing. So, and there we go. Make sure we get everything. New layer, kind of add some shadows to this. Block this section down. Blur, not that much, so we'll go to Gaussian blur. Create clipping mask and turn it down a bit, add it to multiply. Alright, so now we can turn back on this, see what's going on. Nice. Looks like I added some extra shadows right here. It's probably the same for the dark brown layer too. Alright, so there's the cutout. We can go back to the face layer. Go right here, duplicate it, select the mask, invert, and so we have that back. Drag it back below the skin layer. Press Command T, kind of back it up a bit. We're gonna have to redo her eyes, but that's fine. So we'll just turn those white. Alright, so above that layer that we just created, add a new blank layer. B to get to your brush. Make it really big, make sure it's soft on the hardness. And add a little shadow in to really sell the effect. Alright, go to Gaussian blur once again. It's pretty good. Create clipping mask just to keep it in there. And then we want to fix the original stuff that we kind of took off. Alright. The shadows and highlights are probably off as well. They are. So I want to fix that also. else can we do? I don't like that you can't really tell the difference between this. So I'll add another shadow right above that. So new layer, get your brush back on, kind of trace around so you can really see that edge. Another thing I like to do is fix the little fleshy section, or where the skin's cut out. So I'll go through, usually select that area or the full cutout, which is right here. Press W and then right click, select inverse, go to B again. Turn your brush stroke to about, I don't know, 23. Oh, oops. Make sure you're on the pattern layer. Kind of take that just one section out of there. And then to make sure you didn't take away too much from the other areas, you can select the layer right here. W to select inverse. Again, B, make sure you're on the original pattern layer. And then just go back through with your brush at 100% opacity and brush that back in. Pretty simple way to do it instead of spending time cutting it all out. All right, so I think that's good for this tutorial. Usually after this point, I will select the top layer, go to the very bottom, select them all, press Command G, duplicate that group, then press Command E to flatten it, turn it to a smart object, and then press Command Shift A. And this is where I'll go through and do the final coloring. I'll definitely bring up the clarity again, kind of gives it that faux look. Maybe not brighten it up like that. Contrast I don't typically work with. I love to turn the blues to teal. That's my thing. So I usually do that. I always add film grain to cover up all the dirtiness. And usually do the calibration for the camera. I'll fix that to my liking. And yeah, there we go. We have it. All right, guys. If you have any questions, let me know. I'd love to answer them. If you use this tutorial and post the image on Instagram, tag me. I'd love to see it and share your results. Thank you again so much for everything. And yeah, have a good day.